Oh, it's fun. I was down fishing down at Gull Pond. And Rich, my son-in-law, came down and got the, told me that the bees had come in, the post office called. So I picked up the fishing gear and been in the truck and come up to the post office. It was around 4:45 then. And, oh, there's a parcel card in the postal box, so I brought that around. I thought that was for the bees, because they couldn't stuff those boxes of bees into the postal box, that's for sure. But I gave her the card and looked at her, and so she didn't, no reaction at all. I said, boy, that's strange. Usually get more reaction than that. But she went around back, and she come back with a box of a rose bush that Pat had ordered. So I says, okay, I'll take the 6 packages of bees now. She says, oh God, are those yours?
We're going to give them to him out on the back deck because there's some loose ones flying around. He calls them hitchhikers.
The back room was kind of warm and they were pretty active. And packages of bees always have hitchhikers. You know, when they shake bees into those cages, they don't all go in. So there's probably around a dozen or so hitchhikers, and a few of them were flying around the ceiling. So they were worried about those. But I just reassured them. I told them, well, don't worry about them. They'll die of dehydration in a day or two.
Okay,
Not bad. Very little loss. Boy, they were mailed Friday. And I was afraid I'd have a lot of loss, but they're not. They're in good condition.
Good.
Yep. And I picked the bees up and threw them in the truck, and I brought them home. One other thing. Wellfleet Post Office gives very good service. But when you got bees coming down there, they give excellent service. Excellent.
So you're feeding the sugar to the bees?
Yep.
Why?
Well, at this season of the year, there's very little nectar coming in. And where, as you'll see when I do the, open the hive up, there's, all they've got is, foundation. So.
What's that mean? Foundation?
Well, yeah, I put the foundation in the frame.
What's that mean?
That's a sheet of wax.
Oh, that's right.
A sheet of wax, and it has a base of the cell imprinted on it. And it's, the bees will draw that out in a very good comb, honeycomb. They're bringing in a small amount of pussy willow pollen right now.
Well, what are the different trees that they get pollen from around here?
Right around here, here in Cape Cod and Wellfleet, why the buckthrush is a very prominent nectar and pollen source for them. And of course, your maple trees are starting to bud right now. One right across the street there.
And pussy willows?
Yep.
Pussy willows?
Pussy willows. Matter of fact, Pat planted a couple of pussy willows right out in the yard here. I think we planted them last fall, and I think she got one pussy willow on a bush.
And then you said locusts?
Locusts, and as I said, the maple. Oh yeah, and the choke cherry, very good source. And then you get some pollen from the rugosa, the beach rose, beach rose, and then the beach plum. When the beach plum comes in, they start flying. They get a lot of nectar from that.
So your honey will taste different than it would from some other area.
Definitely. And the honey, my honey is beautiful. This is a basic beehive. Notice that this is deep. See, it goes from here to here. That's what you call a deep super or a brood super. And we have the deep frames in them. And over here, you'll notice that we have a shallow super. It only goes from here to here. Now this is what we put the honey in. Any honey that they make and they put in these brood chambers down here, that belongs to them. And that can hold at least 60 pounds and probably 80 pounds of honey. And that's what they use all winter long to survive on. Because bees don't sleep. They don't hibernate. They're very active all winter. And they're in a big cluster, like a big basketball inside the hive. And their body warmth, the movement they make of their bodies, that warms the honey up. And the bees in the middle, 90 degrees. And they warm the honey up and they eat it. And when the bees on the outside of the cluster get to 45 degrees, they start moving in, displacing the 90-degree bees. So all winter long, you've got this state of flux where the bees are moving and feeding and living. So that's the difference between the two supers. We call all of things supers. Now this is an empty super. I'll be using this one to hold the simple syrup for the bees. I'll put it right on top of the beehive. What I'm doing now, I'm taking the frames out of the middle of the hive, and then I'll take and put my hat on. I don't expect to be stung. If I get stung around my body, it won't hurt me too much. My hands, or my torso, or my legs. But I don't like to get stung on my head or my neck because I swell up. And it's kind of hard to apply heat to a sting on your head and still go about your work. If I get stung on my hand, I'll just take the smoker and I'll just puff the smoker on it, and that dissipates the venom.
Any chance of my getting stung?
I doubt that you'll get stung.
Good.
I'm in real close proximity. And you'll notice they keep their cluster very close. I've just been handling these very roughly, and they're going to get even rougher handling. These packages hold 3 pounds. 3 pounds of bees and a can of simple syrup. And of course the queen. They keep the queen in a cage. And the cage is held with this tab right here. The queen is caged separately because if she were free, they would set up housekeeping right in that cage. And it'd be very difficult to get them out of all of that honeycomb that they would build. And they would build an awful lot of honeycomb in 3 days in the shipping time. You just take and knock them off because they're like raisins, still attached to the stem. And they'll stay in that cluster until they're dislodged while they're in the cage. I just remove the queen cage, take off most of the bees that are clinging to it. And you'll notice there's a white area there under the screen. That's candy, made of just sugar and water. It's got a plug in it. Now I'm getting ready to put the bees into the hive, and just watch this. It's hard to believe that you can handle bees this way, but it is very easy to do. You just take and bang it like that, and dump them in like so many raisins, and that's the way they really act. You'll notice there's very few bees flying there. I just try to get as many as I possibly can out of it. I just dump them and handle them as if they were raisins. Now I've got the queen back in. I've taken the plug out of the candy end, and the bees will eat that candy and free the queen. That'll all happen in about a day, maybe 2 days. And by 3 days, she'll be out there, and they will have brought out cells, and she'll be laying eggs in those cells. The simple syrup goes right on top of the opening in the inner cover, and they will need that to live on and to make the honeycomb. I manage them so that they won't swarm, or hopefully. But as you know, that's the only way they have of reproducing their species. I can manage them so that I can probably stop 90% of their swarming by giving them plenty of room and plenty of young queen on every other year. But that urge will overtake them, and they do swarm in spite of all I can do. When they do, the queen comes, the queen is slimmed down so that she can fly. Half the bees take off, take her with her, and because she hasn't flown for at least 2 years in my hives, why, she gets tired very quickly, and they usually light very close to the hives. So I keep an eye open on warm weather like this, and I found it this morning. She lights right there, and the rest of the cluster, half the bees are from the hive, they cluster right around her. Now they'll stay there for maybe an hour and a half. And if I work very quickly and get a hive up there with a frame of brood in it, eggs and young brood that's developing, and dump them into it, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to unceremoniously dump them into it and hope that in the first dump I get the queen in with them. If I do, fine, I'll put the cover on, they'll start feeding the young brood, and hopefully the queen will take up residence there. Otherwise they'll abscond, and I'll have to do it all over again if I can find them. Tonight, after dark, when every single bee in that swarm is with the swarm in that box, I'll go up the ladder and very gently and very quietly bring it down and put it on the hive stand, and they should take up residence and stay there. That's all there is to it. It's very simple to hive a swarm of bees, don't you think so? And I'm driving the bees down now. I've had the top off of this hive for quite a while now. So this one's full, and that one's full, pretty near full. So we're in good luck. Just keep the bees going down. The hive, the frames are all stuck together with propolis. That one's empty. So I'll loosen them all up so I won't have to be prying them all the time. That one got me. If you scrape it out right away, and disguise the odor, with the smoke, why, they won't bother you too much. It says here in fine print. When I was a young man in my early 20s, I was just married and children, and that one wants to sting me on the face. And I couldn't afford to buy bees, so I waited. And sure enough, the place where I was working, a swarm of bees came in over the chimney. I went and I asked him about it, and he said, "Oh, you can get those bees." I says, "Fine." He lent me the equipment, he gave me a hive, and he told me how to do it. And I put the hive up there, and I scraped the bees out of the chimney, and I put them in the beehive. They stayed there, and I was a beekeeper. So that's how I got started with them. This is my solar extractor, and I put in the old burr comb right in that pan, and the heat of the sun melts the beeswax out of it. It runs down into the pan, down right in here at the bottom. Look at that. Pure beeswax.
Like being a beekeeper's wife?
Very interesting.
Yes.
Especially when she's allergic to bees.
I really am.
Oh, hello. Welcome to the honey house. We're going to show you how the beekeeper takes honey out of the honeycomb after he has taken it away from the bees in the beehive. So why don't you come in and I'll show you what all the parts are in a beehive, in a honey house. We've got extractors, we've got separators, and we've got settling tanks, and of course we've got the honey bottles. There's a few honey bottles in here, and I've already brought in the supers that are full of honey. Come on in. It gets pretty warm in here, so I put a headband on. And this here is the separator, and if you just look right at it, and boy, it's pretty good. I uncapped the frames as they come from the hive into here. The wax from the cappings falls in and some honey. There's hot water under it. This is hot. And the honey heats quickly and runs off quickly. But the wax takes longer, and then it melts, and then finally it'll go into this bucket in here on the other side. Then I take and I put them into the extractor. This takes the honey out. From there, I take and put the frames, after I've extracted them, back into the super, and I just continue the march. When my bucket gets full, I pick it up and I put it in here. There's a window screening in here, and it takes out the big pieces of wax and any other debris, pieces of wood from the frame that I might chip off. They run through this pipe over into my settling tank. I leave it in the tank for a short while, about a half a day or so, and that lets all the bubbles that are incorporated by the extractor rise to the top, and then I take it out at the bottom into jars. Now, you know what I'm going to do. Now I'm going to do it. This is my uncapping knife. It's electrically heated. I just turn it on, and we'll let that warm up a little bit. I brought some honey in, and I'm prepared to start uncapping. That's the way the honey looks minus the bees, of course, when I take it out of the hive. So just take the hot knife and I just saw it right down. It takes the cappings off. Clean the frame too while I'm at it. And you've got to be very careful that you get all the cappings off. If they didn't build it out far enough, you've got to take and get them off as best you can. And that's just what I'm doing now. Because if I didn't get those cappings off, why, that cell of honey simply would not extract. It would stay in the frame. It's not too difficult. The knife is hot. It cuts through it like wax. That's what it is. It's wax. Place them in the extractor. The extractor will hold 3 frames. Nice fat comb. That one cut off nicely. Another irregular one. So we make sure we get all the cappings off. A bit of pollen in this one. That's okay. That's why people like local honey, because of the pollen in it. Some people feel that it gives them an immunity to hay fever stuff if they eat the pollen during the just before the pollen season. Now we're ready to extract. Now this is honey on both sides. There's a midrib in the middle. If I would have extracted all at once, the honey on the other side would break the comb. So I just take about half of it out so that I don't get that weight. Just a little bit like that, and it flings it out. Slow it down. Now I can turn it around because half of the honey on this side has been thrown out. And when I let the thing go, it's going to extract the other side completely, and then I'll turn it around again. This is very noisy. Not quite balanced. There's a bee. And we just let it spin for about 2 minutes. While that's spinning, I go ahead and do some other comb. Here, there's a drip pan under that, or else this would be a very messy place. Now, while that slows down, stops, I'll have time to do another frame. Now I'll extract the other side that I didn't complete the first time around. Let it go while it's extracting. Back to the hot knife. Trying to keep ahead of the extractor. outside frame. But it's all good, ripe honey. These are done. Yeah, very nice. You see, most of the pollen stays right in the comb that's been packed in there, but some comes out and it mixes with the honey, and it gives honey a distinctive taste. Let's see. Now, as you can see, all the honey's gone. Nice clean frame. Any damage that I did to the frame, or to the comb, the bees will repair that perfectly. Now we know how we get it out. Now we've got a half a bucket of honey right here. So we'll drain that right into a coarse screen. Now after it goes through this pipe, it goes into this silk nylon stocking. And that takes out all the coarse grains of pollen and any other fine grains of beeswax that might still be in it. And as it goes through, I have a little gas burner underneath it. It warms it up and it speeds up the clarification. The bubbles will rise faster in warm honey because it's thinner when it's warm. Cold honey is just like cold molasses. It just don't move. As the honey gets warm, you can see it running out right here. There's wax coming with it. If you stand here at an angle, you can see it shining on the top of the honey as it flows out. And the wax rises to the top of the honey that's underneath, the warm honey. It's got a separator here. Keeps the wax on this side, and the honey goes down and under and comes out the spout and into the bucket. When the bucket gets full, I just got a little stopper that I made out of a branch. Not very fancy, but it does the job. Just a piece of branch. I whittled it with my knife. And when I'm ready to empty this bucket, I just stick it in the spout. It's coming out of the separator. That stops the dribble, which can amount to quite a bit of honey if you forget for a moment. And I can take and empty that when it gets full. Now let's jar up a little bit of honey. The settling tank has a spigot at the bottom. And I just let it run right into the jar. Put up, leave a little bit of air space because honey expands when it gets hot. And boy, there's nothing worse than a sticky grocer's shelf. You're not going to sell him much honey if you get his shelves all sticky with honey. So you've got to be very careful and leave the proper amount of space at the top of a jar. Now all I've got to do is put the labels on these jars. And when my customers call up and they want a case of honey, I'm all ready. Have some nice honey. That is beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.